great problems. Councillor Merrick, can you do a thumbs up if you can hear us and see us? I'm making it 7:30 now, Sonia. Are you ready to progress? Oh,
you're muted, Sonia.
Hello?
Marcus, can you double check for me?
Yeah, go on. I know that I'm on the meeting. You
mute, Councillor FD.
right? It's Sonia. You in the waiting room or something? Like if you press the link, what she's 1 minute.
Is that okay?
Sonia, can you send?
Sorry.
You're muted, Daniel.
Sorry, unmute. Sorry, Sonia, can you send Julie Gooding an invite to the meeting? I think she's sending an invite now.
Members were all but ready to start. We did want to check that the live streaming was working properly, which we believe it is. Just with your indulgence, Councillor Cannell has not quite arrived yet, and Councillor Gooding is on her way in. So we'll start in just a moment. We'll start within the next 2 minutes. Just in the nick of time.
Chairman, just to let you know, Craig can't join because he said he's in the waiting room and he's not been accepted in.
Right, Sonia, you've got that one? Oh, he's there.
He has been admitted, and I've just changed his name, and he's there.
Councillor Cannell, could you just say something so as we can? Councillor Sperring, can you mute, please? Councillor Cannell, I feel.
Hey, yeah, sorry, I've been having problems with the audio. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that, guys. Cheers.
That's okay. If you wouldn't mind muting now, please. Thanks. Councillor Merrick is still the one that's having a problem. Right. Everyone has been patient, so I do think we need to start. So, welcome to the Development Committee. 7th of May 2020. Obviously, this is a remote meeting, but we are going to be making formal decisions. Clearly, despite our rehearsals, it's an evening when there is going to be a little bit of technical technical issues going on. I will make sure that everyone, all the members, are properly informed before asking anyone to make a decision. If you can indicate by physically putting up your hand or using one of the icons, then one of the officers will note that, or I'll note it, and in due course we'll come to you. Obviously, you don't necessarily get called it straight away, sir, but we will notice. We are not taking over muting of mics, so if you could mute your mic
Sorry.
when you're speaking,
Mm.
then unmute when you're going to speak. Please avoid any temptations to interrupt anyone. Indicate that you wish to speak, and then I'll come to you in due course. Just as in any other meeting, you need to be here for the full duration of an item that's been discussed if you're a member and going to vote. So please avoid any temptations to wander off because you're in more familiar surroundings. We are being recorded. We are being live streamed. We will check and confirm that before we start. And just around 8 o'clock, or just in advance of 8 o'clock, we will stop and take an adjournment. So that said, I think we need to move on to the agenda, and item 1, emergency evacuation announcement. I think you can all in your own domestic environments work out what you need to do, but if you do need to leave, please let us know in some form. So item 1 is apologies for absence. I've got all members here, although Councillor Lucas Gill has had a problem, so there's a substitute there. I'll go through substitute members first. So as of now, we have Councillor Gooding, who is substituting for Councillor Lucas Gill. And item 3, in terms of our non-members attending, I've got Councillor Mr. Hoy, Councillor Mrs. Hoy, Councillor Mrs. Mason, Councillor Steptoe, Councillor Newport, Councillor Ianu, Councillor Sperring. Are there any other members that are not attending? Right, Councillor Mrs. Mason, you've indicated already. Have I missed you?
No, I just can't get the thumb down.
Okay, that'll just go down in due course. Thank you. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of February 2020. Can you please, on a clear show of hands, indicate if you're happy for me to sign those as a correct and accurate record of that meeting? Okay, thank you very much for that. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Right, I'm going to start with Councillor Mr. Shaw.
Non-pecuniary interest, item 9. I'm the ward councillor for that item.
Thank you. Other members? Scanning my screen. That's all I'm seeing at this moment in time. Obviously, if there's something that crops up during the course of the meeting, then please indicate. Okay, that means that we can move on to item 6, which is land to the north, land north of London Road, the south of Rawrath Lane, and west of Rawrath Industrial Estate, Rayleigh. Katie Rogers is going to present to us on this one. You will lose, in case you're not familiar, you'll lose your screen and you'll start to see plans. Okay, Katie, if you would like to go, please.
Thank you. Members, on the screen you should see the location plan. This application relates to part of a wider site. The whole, edged blue on the screen, was granted outline planning permission for residential and other development in 2016. Phase 1, which is to the north, just where the cursor is here, has been granted reserved matters consent and development is underway. This application relates to the area outlined red to the south of Phase 1. The western boundary of the application site would run adjacent to the Spine Road, which will run through the wider site from Rawrath Lane to the north to London Road to the south. On screen now is the outline consent parameter plan that was approved. The outline consent established the areas of the site that could be residentially developed. These are shown in the beige colour. This application relates to this central part here. All reserved matters, namely layout, scale, appearance, landscaping and access, are for determination in this application. All other matters, such as, for instance, relate to drainage and ecology, have been dealt with at the outline stage. There are a number of planning conditions relating to these on the outline consent, and these matters therefore cannot be revisited here. Members, this is the layout plan of the proposed 120 dwellings. Dwellings would front the highway along the Spine Road, indicated by the cursor here, and there would also front roads within the site. A central green space would be provided, which would be 0.2 hectares in area. This would accord with the requirement for such on the outline planning consent, and this would link to the open space in Phase 1 to the north. 2 points of access are proposed off the Spine Road, one here, which would provide vehicular access to the northern part of the site, and another point of access to the southern boundary here, which would provide access to the residential parcel to the south. Only pedestrian access would be provided in the green space in the central area. All dwellings would be provided with amenity space as rear gardens, and flats would be provided with communal space. The flats on the proposal are here, with the rear amenity space here. There's another block of flats here, again with the amenity space adjoining. In addition, there's a flatted block here with amenity space to the rear, and one in this corner here to the south. Car parking will be provided on plot or in parking courts or parallel to the street, such as some visitor spaces along part of the central green space. If I take you to the next plan, this shows the hard surfacing proposed, and a number of shared surface streets would feature. These are shown in the darker pink colour on the plan. These would be surfaced in a red tarmac to clearly denote areas where there would be no separate pedestrian footway. Private drives would be block paved. The next plan shows you an indication of the scale of the buildings proposed. So in terms of scale, buildings would be largely 2-storey, with a handful of 2.5-storey to the northern area here, and then 3-storey flatted block to the eastern boundary here. So some street scenes have been provided, and street scene AA, which is on the top of the screen and is indicated by the cursor here on the layout plan, shows the dwellings which would front the Spine Road in the northern part of the site. The first 4 dwellings indicated by the cursor here would be 2.5 storey, with the remainder down to 2 storey. Section BB here, again, is an elevation, a section that would front the highway along here. So these would face the Spine Road and all be 2 storey in height. The central green space would fall between the 2 rendered dwellings, and you will note that both elevations to these dwellings would be fenestrated. This would provide overlooking of the green space, important to ensure that the public space feels safe. You'll note the slight gradient to the section AA, and that reflects the fact that the site is not flat. This more pronounced gradient on the site is clearly seen in section EE, and this is a section, apologies. Ooh. This is a section through looking north on the central green space here. You will note that a variety of finishing materials are proposed, red and buff brick, as well as render and boarding. The dwellings would have traditional form and appearance with pitched roofs and symmetrical fenestration. Several illustrations have been provided. This one shows a view across a section of the central green space. Landscaping details have been provided which are comprehensive and show planting of a significant number of trees in the central green space and across the wider site. The last visual shows you the 3-storey flatted block proposed. And although more significant in height and massing, these would have an outlook onto the adjacent green space and be of a scale and appearance appropriate to this part of the site. Members, all aspects of the reserve matters are considered acceptable, and the recommendation is therefore one of approval, subject to the stated conditions, including an amendment to the condition listing the approved plans to remove reference to the design and access statement, planning statement and foul and surface water technical note, as these do not need to be listed as approved plans. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We've got a speaker on this one, although all of our speakers tonight are submitted in the form of written statements, and Sonia Worthington is going to read out this one, which is Mr. Teddy Tedder from Bloor Homes. If you could unmute Sonia and read that one, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this committee. I'm Terry Tedder and I'm the Regional Managing Director for Bloor Homes. Before I start, I would like to congratulate the Council for its efforts in ensuring that Council services can continue to operate at this extraordinary time. Your officers have shown phenomenal resilience and adaptability in recent weeks, and I would like to extend my thanks for all that they and you do. I would also like to reassure you about the plans that we have in place to ensure that housing can continue to be delivered. You'll all be aware that housing construction has paused to respect the lockdown restrictions that are in place. Bloor Homes has been working with the wider industry to identify ways in which construction can resume safely and housing delivery can commence. I am pleased to advise that Bloor Homes has put in place robust and safe working arrangements to allow construction of its sites to resume this month. Your approval of our scheme tonight would mean that we will be able to commence development in the coming months as planned, and to ensure that this important part of your housing supply comes forward as soon as possible, while providing jobs locally and stimulating the economy. Tonight, you're being asked to approve the details of our scheme at Wolseley Park. You've already approved the outline permission for housing at this site, and you will no doubt have seen that Countryside has started to build some of the homes permitted. We have acquired a parcel of land within the wider Wolseley Park site, and our application relates to that parcel. It is worth remembering that our parcel is not being developed in isolation. The wider Wolseley Park development delivers the road network, infrastructure, and large areas of open space and play facilities that surround all of the parcels of development, leaving just the details of the housing areas to be considered. It is those details that are before you tonight for the parcel that Bloor Homes will deliver. Your officer's report provides a thorough and detailed description of the proposal and explains that it is consistent with the terms of both the outline planning permission and your development plan. Given the detail in the report, I intend to simply highlight the key aspects of the proposal. The proposal provides 120 homes at a density that is consistent with the density plan that was approved as part of the outline permission. It does not seek to increase the density beyond that which you have already considered to be reasonable within this parcel. These 120 homes include 35% affordable housing, which equates to 42 new homes. The entire scheme includes a mix of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bed homes, which has been discussed and agreed with your officers as contributing towards the housing needs of your district. The design of the scheme has evolved through detailed discussions with officers and advisors at Essex Police Services, resulting in the unequivocal support of the design officer at paragraph 4.2 of the officer's report. The design of the scheme was a matter that was reserved until this application came along. It has never been approved by this council, and so now is the first time that you're being asked to consider this, which you can now do safe in the knowledge that your statutory consultee has provided his clear support for the design. Throughout the design process, we have made sure that the scheme complies with all relevant standards. As a result, our scheme fully meets and in places exceeds the parking standards, the standards for separation distances, garden size requirements and the national space standards. We have also redesigned elements and acquired additional land from Countryside to ensure that the issues raised by the Highway Authority can be addressed in full, as confirmed at paragraph 4.3 of the officer's report. Members, you have before you a scheme that is without objection and that your officer has confirmed complies with both the outline permission and your relevant development plan policies. I can confirm that there are not any barriers that will prevent us from delivering this site as soon as you agree these details. I therefore respectfully request that you agree with your officer's recommendation and approve the scheme tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we now move on to the discussion. Can I ask if there are any of our non-members that wish to say anything on this one? Okay, we'll go straight to Councillor Mrs. Mason, please.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've read this. I'm having difficulty because I've only got an electronic copy, but so forgive me if I can't refer to the correct paragraphs. But with all these types of applications, the devil is in the detail. And overall, it seems predominantly a very good scheme. However, there are areas of concern. One of those concerns is, and you'll not be surprised to hear me say this, is the allocation of affordable housing. We have a clear policy of pepper potting. The fact that clear policy is usually ignored doesn't relieve it from being our policy. It shouldn't be aspirational, it should be achievable. The design and layout is not pepper potting, it's clustered. And there is a fundamental difference. There is a site that I'm quite familiar with down in Rochford. I won't give the name of the site. And the difficulty that happens when you have this clustering is you get a them and us situation. So from perhaps a building perspective, and I can understand it from the applicant's perspective for selling, it's fine. But we should be building homes for our residents so that they can build a community within that area rather than a them and us situation. The other concern I have with affordable housing is the normal 35% should, in my view, be 35% of the 4 bedrooms, 35% of the 3 bedrooms. But no, what we have here is a very clear discrimination where the affordable housing is purely all the 1-bed apartments, all the 2-bed apartments, and I believe some of the 2-bed houses. I understand that this is agreed with our housing and allocations officer, but I don't believe it represents a true 35%. And I do think we also have residents that need larger properties. I think we've got one 4-bed. So the larger proportion, to my mind, is distortionate. Are we saying that no private person wants to buy a 1-bedroom flat? And I also find the 3-storey block rather unacceptable, but that is a minor point, I suppose, over that. The other point that I'd like to point out, the applicant has stated that all standards are met. In the officer's report, and I'll see if I can find it, it states that for the flats, because the affordable housing, dare I say,
reference the particular point.
yeah, I am. I am going to the point. I'm just trying to find it. It's rather difficult in this forum. For the flats, the amenity space, it says should have a minimum of 50 metres squared amenity. The apartment block would not have balconies nor any private patio areas. However, the block would be served by a grassed area to the front aspect and 72 metres square, and rear and flank west amenity space amounting to 1.51, totaling some 223. Whilst this would not be 25 square metres per flat, in this case, the amount of this amenity space is considered acceptable given the significant amount of open public green space. And I'm quoting here. Why do we have a policy and then say that it's acceptable when we don't meet that policy? I'll just leave that there. I'll leave it to the committee to decide, but I must admit that those are 2 concerns that I think should be addressed, even if they're in conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other non-members wanting to speak on this one? Right, okay, thank you. I'm conscious that it's 3 minutes to 8 now, so I think we're at a convenient and appropriate time to adjourn the meeting. I think if we adjourn now until 8:05, please, I think it would be sensible if you didn't break your connections. Just put your microphones on mute, leave your vision on, do what you need to do. But 8:05, if you wouldn't mind being back for a restart. Thank you. Councillor Merrick, you finally all joined with us properly. You were really struggling, weren't you?
Yes, my computer just crashed. I had a great deal of difficulty getting back. In the end, I had to reboot my iPad and eventually got back to you. So I shan't be voting on this particular.
Okay.
I should just sit quietly and listen to the rest of it.
Okay. Thanks, then.
Yeah. Hopefully it won't happen again, but I'll keep my fingers crossed.
It's coming through strongly now. Thanks.
I think it would also be appropriate that I don't vote on the next item either, because they're inextricably connected, I think. Wouldn't you agree?
The next item will be a wholly independent report. I wouldn't worry about that one.
You're okay with that? All right, that's fine.
Right. Looks like everyone is back now. It's 5 past. So I'll resume the meeting then. So just as a reminder, thank you for that. It is hopefully appreciated by those it's intended for. I'm sure it is. So we're on item 6, land to the north of London Road, Rayleigh. We've had our non-members speaking. So now this is for members. We're looking on the motion for approval, which is printed on 6.1 and there's 8 points. Are there any members that wish to contribute here? So Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. The development looks fine, but I've got concern with the brickwork that it's not going to it's going to look completely out of place with what Countryside are already doing. So we'll have two estates completely different. They won't blend into the street scene.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to comment? No? Right, okay. Councillor Stanley. Councillor Stanley, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reinforce what has already been said by Councillor Mason in relation to the clustering and quite frankly, not large enough amenity space. But having said that, there are several other items which I would like to question the officer, if that's possible. Page 610 on the documentation, point 314. Is this item still in appeal? If she could answer that one. And then we go on to item 3.42, disabled parking. there isn't sufficient, I don't think there is sufficient disabled parking, and that includes point 344 and 345, where we do not have any parking for mobiles. And that I mean carriages, not cars, but carriages, where that is, if we're going to have disabled parking, we need it for their mobile facilities, because a lot of disabled people now have carriages, and there is nothing on the site there for them. And also the 3.83, and this amounts to the surface water that will accumulate on the footpaths and in the roads. It is said in the documentation that it is put, the water is gathered underneath the footpaths, but then where does it go from there? I don't see any illustration as to where that water, that surface water goes. And getting back to the first thing that I mentioned for housing needs, is that it's not always a 1 bed or a 2 bed that we should accommodate. It is also 3 beds and maybe 1 or 2 more 4 beds. So I don't think that this is accommodating enough on the site. Thank you, Chairman. Could I have an answer to those questions, please?
Yeah, yes, we'll come around to that. Right, I've got no other members indicating, so I'm going to ask Katie to come back on those points regarding style, pepper potting and disabled facility. Katie, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just bear with me a second. I'm just going to share my screen again so members can see the layout plan. Hopefully members can see the layout plan. So in respect of the first question about affordable housing and pepper potting, so the affordable housing properties are marked with a red dot. So you'll see that there's flats here, houses here, flats here, a house here, in the flatted blocks here, and where my cursor is showing you to the eastern boundary as well. So on this eastern boundary, between the affordable, there are a pair of semi-detached market houses. It is important to achieve pepper potting. The extent to that has to be sort of worked out with the developer as well. In this case, I think if you look at the street scene, so if you take this elevation, this street scene here, which would overlook the open space to the north in phase 1, all of these dwellings would face this space here. So they all have their front doors onto this space. And of that street, if you look, say, you could take it round this corner as well. These are the affordable. You have affordable here, but then you have market housing going to the north. Again, on this little street in the centre, you've got market housing, then leading to this dwelling here, which would be opposite a market house as well. Maybe to bear in mind is that this development site is only part of this central parcel. So if you look at my cursor here on this wider layout plan in the bottom corner of your screen, you'll see that this southern part of this parcel remains to be submitted for reserve matters. So we will have another part of development here. So maybe what we need to be mindful of in future is that we don't approve more affordable in this particular location, maybe. But if this adjoined more market housing here, maybe with affordable going to the very southern extent, that would sort of even things up slightly. Again, you're going to have the Spine Road coming through with another development parcel here opposite to the southwestern corner, which may well have affordable fronting the street scene there. that's something that we can consider. But taken in the round, we think that there is enough of a mix in the area of pepper potting for affordable. I think the next question, bear with me, related to page 6.10 of the report and 3.14, and it referenced a previous application at this site, which was at the outline stage. It was submitted in 2014, so it had a 14 reference, and whether that's still at appeal. As far as I understand, it is. So it is at appeal, but I don't think there's any prospect of the developer wanting, the applicant wanting to progress with that appeal. I have queried it over the last week or so and asked for that to be updated. That appeal, I think, would likely be withdrawn because the 2016 outline consent and then further reserve matters that relate to that consent are being implemented at the site as we, right now. So I don't think that appeal will progress. In relation to surface water, footways and roads in relation to this site, the issue of surface water drainage was dealt with at the outline stage in great detail. If I take you back to this plan here, this is the approved parameters plan at the outline stage. So in the outline, we considered that how much of the site would be residentially developed, and the applicant was required to submit a draft drainage strategy. And this included that they would use or create attenuation basins, so one to the western boundary and then two more either side of the Rorath Brook. The whole site is going to drain to these attenuation basins, and that includes all the water that would land on any footways within the site and roads. It'll all drain to these attenuation basins and be held there, and then drain out of those attenuation basins into the Rorath Brook at an agreed rate. And that agreed rate will achieve betterment in relation to the rate that would have happened for high intensity rainfall events on this site. But having said that, the surface water drainage is not a matter for this reserved matters application. The applicant, if the reserved matters is approved this evening, will need to submit a discharge of condition application for us to agree detailed surface water drainage in relation to this whole parcel, and that condition was imposed on the outline consent. I'm just trying to go now to that part of the plan, so just bear with me. I'll just stop sharing this screen a moment and just try to find the specific part in the officer report that Councillor Stanley referred to in the parking.
.42 that was 6:15.
Sorry. Layout and parking, paragraphs 3.40 onwards. If I just find the right reference, then I can share that on the screen. So paragraph 3.44 talks about the provision of disabled bays. So 30 visitor parking spaces are provided, which would include 3 disabled parking bays. And of the provision of 218 parking spaces, this would include 4 disabled bays. And 4 of the properties on the site would be required to be built to wheelchair accessibility standards. That's the only information I have in relation to that at the moment.
Would you just like to pass comment on what Councillor Shaw said about the style?
Oh, in terms of, sorry, yes, Councillor Shaw, apologies. In relation to the brickwork and the render, if I take you to, if I just bring back up a street scene plan and share that with you. So this is one of the street scenes. So you'll see there's a mix of render and brickwork. What I would say is that the intention was at the outline stage that there would be phases, so sort of character areas within the wider site. And with the number of dwellings to be provided across the site as a whole, and that is about 500 dwellings, you do want some variety in the areas. So whilst the materials proposed here would be different to those proposed to the north in that area, the areas are sufficiently big to warrant sort of different materials being used to give each area a different character, so it doesn't just sort of all look a bit sort of monotone across the site of 500 dwellings. And we think these are appropriate. The style of dwellings is quite traditional, so you've got pitched roofs, small dormers, and we think they would look attractive and create a good environment for people to live in.
Okay, thank you. If you could just unshare that and we can get that full screen. Okay, Councillor Stanley is the only one that indicated to come back, so I'll just take Councillor Stanley's point and then we'll progress this one. Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. There was another couple of items which thank you very much for elaborating on the parking. Although there is wheelchair accessibility in the property, it doesn't actually say mobility in the way of getting out of the car or getting into or moving into a mobile carriage, not a wheelchair. Because as we know, most disabled people do have these mobile carriages. The other thing I wanted to raise was who is attending to the corridor, the green corridor, who is attending to that as to looking after it, cutting the grass and so on. And also the, I've forgotten what I was going to say now. Yeah, just who is attending to the grounds. My other, oh yes, that's right. The other question is, could the officer direct a assessment to the gardens to the affordable homes? I believe they're undersized, so could she rectify that query, please?
Is there anybody else wants to make any points? So I'm just conscious that we've got to progress the meeting, so we'll just take these answers and then we'll progress. Okay, Katie, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to the green spaces, the outline consent was subject to a Section 106 legal agreement, which requires a management company essentially to be in charge and maintain public open spaces, green spaces throughout the site, of which there are going to be a number. So this one centrally positioned within this parcel, but also there are much bigger areas as well to be maintained. So that would be covered in that. And the garden areas to the affordable homes, again, if I'm just going to bring up the layout plan again and just zoom into an area of that. I'll share that then. So on screen, what you shall see is a zoomed in section of the layout plan. So the affordable homes are with the red dots. So here where the cursor is, these are flats. So there's 4 flats here and they have an amenity area to the rear, which is 100 square meters. So that does meet the requirement in terms of 25 square meters of communal space per flat. There's then some houses that have the required amenity space to the rear. Again, here, this is a flatted block which has communal space that meets the requirement just to the north. The only affordable housing that does not meet the sort of communal space per flat, 25 square meters, would be this these flatted blocks here. But I think taken as a whole, the development does achieve ample space in terms of open green space for people to use throughout. And I think what we have to bear in mind when looking at this particular flatted block is that the amount of open green space that's right essentially on these people's doorsteps. So they will have this nice outlook onto this green space within phase one, and then which extends to this green parcel that goes to the west here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, members, we have a recommendation for approval, which is printed on page 6.1. There are then 8 particular points that follow that, plus the things that have been withdrawn that they're not necessary. Can I ask that those members in favour of the proposal make a clear indication with their hand? Sonia, can you just confirm that you've seen everyone? Okay, those against? Okay, I think that was quite clear. That item is carried. Thank you very much for that one. Next is item 7. Again, land to the north of London Road, Rayleigh. It's the construction of a spine road. It's on the same site, but it's a separate presentation. So again, Katie is going to take us through this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members should see on screen a location plan. This application is also at the site of land north of London Road, and this plan shows the whole site, which is subject to the outline consent for residential development approved in 2016. To the right-hand side of the screen is Rawrth Lane, with London Road running to the left-hand side. The outline consent approved a spine road running through the site from north to south, and several sections of this road have already been granted reserved matters approval. This application is for 2 further sections within the site, either side of the Rawrth Brook, just pointed out by the cursor on the screen there. Take you to the layout plan. This plan is orientated with Rawrth Lane to the top of the screen and shows the Rawrth Brook bisecting the site east-west. If I just zoom in to the central section. Oops. So on the screen there, zoomed in, you'll see the proposed 2 sections of the spine road. The northern and southern sections would have a swale running adjacent to the northern side of the carriageway with an amenity grass verge to the north. Footways will be provided on either side of the carriageway. A bus stop will be provided just where the cursor is here in the southern section. Some changes to existing land levels would be required to achieve an appropriate gradient, involving raising and lowering the land in places. The northern section would link to a section of the spine road that has already been granted reserved matters consent. If I just zoom, you can see that here. So the existing approval extends down to here, and this application is proposing to, carry this spine road on. The section in the centre is not subject to this application. There will be a bridge over the brook that is still being worked up and will be before members as a reserve matters application in due course. All reserve matters, including the layout, access and landscaping, are accepted, and the recommendation, Chairman, is therefore one of approval.
Thank you. Okay. Are any of our non-members wanting to speak on this one? Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I tried to indicate before, but I couldn't manage it. I've got to leave the meeting, so apologies. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your attendance so far. Any other non-members wish to say anything on this one? Okay, thank you. On to the members' discussion. Councillor Stanley, you've indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask, we usually get an identification as to who disagreed and who was abstaining, but we didn't get that on the last count. Where the bus stops are, that really is just before the bridge. Is that the right place for a bus stop to be, as there wouldn't be any overtaking or anything like that, and could lead to, as that is, could lead to a dangerous area? I do think that the bus stops should be moved further away from the bridge, and I do realise there are two junctions according to the map, but nevertheless I do think that those bus stops should be moved further away.
Okay, not taken. Any other members wish to say anything? Okay, so can I ask you, Katie, to make reference to the bus stop, please?
Yes, Chairman. What I would say, Essex County Council Highway Authority have been consulted on the application and have looked at where the bus stop will be, where the junction arrangements will be, and they're satisfied that the proposal will comply with their requirements. They are going to adopt the road in due course, that's the intention, and therefore if they're satisfied with the positioning of the bus stop, the visibility displays, etc., we also accept that the bus stop is appropriately located. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think this one's technically complicated but relatively simple to determine, so I think we're ready to go to the vote. Oh, Councillor FD, just a quick final indication.
Yeah, just a quick question for Katie. With the, we don't really know about what's happening with the bridge. If it is quite a large hump bridge, could we relook at the bus stop again in the future?
Thank you. Shall I come back? So, I mean, yes. So what will need to happen is that the bridge design will also need to be accepted by Essex County Council. If that then required the bus stop to move in order for the County Council to accept and adopt this road, that would be something that the applicant may need to consider. Clearly, the applicant would want this road to be adopted by the Highway Authority. So if that needed to happen with a revision to the consent in due course, and that may be the case, but as it stands at the moment, we don't know that the bridge design would mean that that bus stop isn't appropriately located.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Merrick, you did the last minute indication there.
I would just like to seek advice at the beginning of, before we take the vote, as Katie started her presentation, once again, the plan disappeared from my screen. I could still hear the presentation, but I didn't see the plan for a couple of minutes. I don't think it made any difference, but I would seek advice whether I should vote on this occasion.
Can I ask Chris Irwin to comment, please?
Yeah, unfortunately, if member hasn't seen the plan, I would argue that it's probably advisable not to vote on that one because of obviously any future suggestions. So, do you agree with that, Chair?
Okay. Councillor Stanley, you've indicated again.
Thank you, Chairman. Just like to point out that should that bus stop have to be moved, it would cost £10,000 to move it, as was indicated when we was to Essex County Council was to move the bus stop from outside Hambro Parade shops to move it further down the road to Holbridge Road.
Yeah, can I just stop you there, because that's not relevant to us making this decision. The application is the application, and that's what we must determine for now. I'm going to go to the vote then. Now we've had that clarity. Just for the sake of clarity, and in case anyone is listening, just audio wise and playing back, we'll do a roll call vote. So if you can be hot on your unmute buttons going through this, I'm quite happy to go through this. So the motion is for approval, printed on page 7.2 of the report, and I'll just go through in order that I've got members. So I'll start with myself. I am for. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
For.
Councillor Canal.
For.
Councillor FD.
For.
Councillor Eaves.
For.
Councillor Gooding.
For.
Skipping Councillor Merrick, who said he'll abstain. Councillor Mr. Shaw.
For.
Councillor Stanley.
For.
Councillor Weston.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Wilson.
For.
Councillor Wotton.
For.
Thank you very much. That item is approved. Okay, well, I'll just call up the next item. Item 8, 37 Holmbridge Road, Rayleigh, single-storey flat roof addition. I think Katie will explain why this one wouldn't normally come to us, but if you'd like to present again, please, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share the screen. Members, you should be able to see the location plan for this item. This is an application that would usually be delegated and not come before the Development Committee. However, this is required in this case as the applicant is related to a council officer. The site is edged red on the plan on the screen and has a deep front garden and smaller garden to the rear. Take you to the block plan. The proposal is for a single-storey rear extension, and members will note from the site plan to the top here that the proposed extension would be to a depth in line with the extension to the attached neighbour. You can see the elevations proposed on screen now. A window is also proposed to the side elevation, and the extension would have a flat roof and feature a roof light. No neighbour objections have been received, and the proposal would not be readily visible from the street scene. It is considered that the proposal would not give rise to any harm and would comply with adopted council policies. The recommendation is one of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any non-members wishing to speak on this one? Not one of our most controversial applications, I don't think. Right, do any members wish to speak on this one? Councillor Merrick.
Same problem again, Chairman. Once the plan comes up, I lose the picture from my screen, and then it takes a couple of minutes before I can get it back again. And I'm thinking this is going to happen on every occasion. So I think if you agree, it would be sensible that I leave the meeting altogether, and we try and get this sorted out for future meetings.
That's your decision ultimately, Councillor Merrick. I do understand your problems. Can I just ask Chris Irwin if he'd just like to pass comment?
Yeah, same situation as the last item, I think, Chair. Unfortunately, if members going to have, technical difficulties, and there's any sort of suggestion that not all the information was available, I think it's going to be worth, not voting on that. Obviously, whether he wants to stay and observe is obviously up to him. So,
could I just ask Councillor Merrick, do you actually have copies of the plans? If you could unmute, please.
Sorry. I have the report.
Okay.
It's only the one on the report, which I don't think. No, it wasn't the same as what was on the came on the screen when I eventually got it back.
Okay. We'll take your point. It's if you leave the meeting, we'll understand that reason.
Put it out for future occasions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Right, members. Oh, Councillor Stanley, you've indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. There seemed, I think, 3.14 is parking. Could I ask the officer to go back to the plan, please?
Do you want to make your point as we do that?
Is there, for parking reasons, is there tandem parking on site?
Katie, would you like to just describe the parking arrangement, please?
Apologies, Chairman. I had a problem unmuting, but it's okay now. If I share my screen, I'll just go to the block plan. So the block plan is on the screen here, and this is the long front garden, and there's a driveway to the front, and the proposed development to the rear of the property does not affect the existing parking arrangements on the site. It has parking that complies with the council's parking standard.
That's fine, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, members, we'll go to the vote on this one. It's on 8.1. There are 3 points. Recommendation for approval. Hot on the unmute buttons again, please. I'll start with myself. Councillor Smith, 4. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
4.
Councillor Cannell. We've lost him. Okay. Councillor FD.
4.
Councillor Eves.
4.
Councillor Gooding.
4.
Councillor Merrick. Councillor Merrick's gone. Councillor Mr. Shaw.
4.
Councillor Stanley.
4.
Councillor Weston.
4.
Councillor Williams.
Approve.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson, we missed you there. For Councillor Wotton.
4.
And back to Councillor Cannell.
4. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That item is approved. Item 9, 483 Ashington Road, Ashington, retrospective application to replace picket fence. Can I just remind members before we do this one, the fact that this item is retrospective is not a material planning concern. Thank you. Over to Katie.
Thank you, Chairman. On screen is the location plan. The site is edged red and has a boundary to both Ashington Road to the east and Albert Road to the north. I'll just take you to the block plan. The proposal seeks retrospective planning permission to retain an enclosing boundary fence to the boundary along Ashington Road, denoted by the yellow highlighting on the plan on screen. This photo shows the fence that is the subject of the application behind the road sign. The darker coloured fence along the Albert Road boundary is historic and lawful and not the subject of the application. So the application before you tonight solely relates to this brighter coloured fence behind the Albert Road sign. This street image shows the site at a time before the closed boarded fencing was erected along the boundary frontage with Ashington Road. Members, the site is within a built-up residential area with similar corner plot properties dotted the length of Ashington Road. Most properties along Ashington Road have vehicular access from the highway and have front gardens that feature parking and soft landscaping. Most front boundaries adjacent to Ashington Road are lower in height, providing a degree of spaciousness about the street scene, which helps to create a character to the locality which is visually attractive and an environment attractive to pedestrians using the footway along this busy street. Significant lengths of higher closed boarded fencing can appear visually unattractive, especially when on a boundary very prominent in the public realm. If replicated, the cumulative resulting impact to the attractiveness of the street scene would be very significant. In this prominent location, the proposed higher closed boarded fence is considered inappropriate and harmful to visual amenity in the street scene, and the recommendation, Chairman, is therefore one of refusal.
Thank you. We have a speaker statement on this from Ms. Sean Barlow, who is the applicant. And again, Sonia is going to read this one out for us. Thank you.
I'm writing today to state my reasons for swapping a picket fence with a timber fence in the garden of 483 Ashington Road. Firstly, I'd like to add that I never knew you needed planning permission to erect a fence on your property, hence the reason it has already been done, but below are all the reasons for doing so. Main reason is the security for my children and dog. This property fronts the Ashington Road, which is one of the busiest roads in the area. My dog actually got out through the picket fence prior to putting the fence up, but luckily managed to get to her before she headed into the road. Our next door neighbour has an adjoining fence that is 1.5 metres high. Across the road is a public house where we had two drunk guys one evening talking to my children, frightening them and leaving them running in crying. Adding to the pub, we have also witnessed people jump the fence and kick the kids' footballs in the garden. There are 8 other properties on Ashington Road with the same style fencing at roughly the same height, certainly above a metre high. I gathered this was okay to do. There are no site issues with regard to leaving Albert Road as proven by the Highways Agency. The fence is a continuation of an existing fence that also adjoins a highway, Albert Road, that has been there for many years. The existing fence was a picket style. The highway's grassed area is unfortunately not cut on a regular basis. Therefore, the weeds and lengthy grass progressing into my garden are a constant issue. There is a local man, unsure on the name, who is known to have mental health problems that has been witnessed leaning over the picket fence, picking up items in my property. All of the above reasons are why we changed the style of fences and have been complimented on many occasions from residents and also the businesses opposite.
Are there any of our non-members that are wishing to speak on this one? Okay, thank you. I notice Councillor Weston, you indicated for this one.
Thank you, Chairman. Katie, the old fence that was there has, I noticed when you showed us the picture before, the picket fence, did the picket fence, was that going against the old fence that is there at the moment? Or was the picket fence all around the whole of the property and the old fence was put there later on? If you get my meaning. That's the first question. The second question, sorry, Kate, second question, has he had any complaints from neighbours because of that side of the fence as well, please? Thank you.
What we'll do is we'll line up all the questions for one go, keep things moving smoothly. Councillor Stanley, you've indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I quite agree with the officer in their recommendations. It is not in character with the surrounding area, even though down the road further it might be just 1.5 metres. It's still not in character with the rest of the street scene. So I totally agree with the officer. Thank you.
Councillor Eaves, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask Katie what the standard is that is there? Because it's a little confusing to us to make a decision on this. When you look at the fence next door was 1.5, seems very little difference. If this applicant actually then reapplied to 1.5 high, would that then conform to standard, or does it need to be lower? I'm a little bit confused because you haven't actually explained to us what the standard should be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I live in the area and pass this property probably 4 or 5 times a week. I hadn't even noticed the fence had gone up. It is at an angle. It doesn't actually go straight in line with the highway. It reduces back into Albert Road and is not really noticeable. And the 1.5 metre fence isn't down the road, it's next door. So I would have no hesitation in recommending this for approval. Thank you.
Okay, are any other members indicating they wish to speak? Councillor FD.
I've got the same as Councillor Williams, actually. I drive past there quite often, and until this plan application came up, I didn't even notice the fence had changed. And I think I'd have no objection to this fence at all.
Okay, thank you. So if I ask Katie to come back and mention to take the questions, particularly about the height standard, please.
So I'll just share the image again. The first question related to where the picket fence went up to. So it went across the whole of the front boundary, adjoining to the closed boarded fence that went along the Albert Road frontage. The second question related to any complaints from neighbours. All I can say on that matter is that it's a retrospective application that I understand has come from an enforcement inquiry. Then I think Councillor Eaves asked about a standard. So what the applicant householder could do without needing to apply to the local authority for planning permission is put up a boundary treatment, wall, fence, up to 1 metre in height from ground level. Anything above that would require planning permission. And I think the concern here is in this, it's a very public setting. It's a busy street with pedestrians as well. If it were replicated, setting a precedent, that might have cumulative negative impact. And it's quite a long length that we're talking about, just the short length that the neighbouring property has their fence up to, but it's more significant than that. I hope that answers the question. Indeed, the boundary does not have to be marked by a fence. It could be planted, in which case, obviously, if it were a hedge, green, perhaps potentially less visually prominent, could go clearly beyond a metre in height. Wouldn't need planning permission.
Okay, thank you for your contributions. I think this is quite oh, Councillor FD, you just want to come back?
Just a very quick question. Where I look at the picket fence, is that their back garden or their front garden?
It's a picket fence. It doesn't matter whether it's front or back.
I just wonder if it was their back garden or their front garden.
It's the fence application.
Okay.
Councillor Wotton.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just have a little look at the visual with the fencing, please, with the high fence? Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, members, this is a slightly tricky one in my opinion. We have our policies. Our professional judgment by our officers is that this doesn't comply and they're recommending for refusal. It might not make a difference, but equally a house in the woods in the middle of the green belt might not make any difference if no one can see it and no one can complain. We do have to be conscious in a prominent location of the ongoing precedent that this might create. Technically, everybody that lives in the Ashington Road, if this one were approved, could put up a 6-foot fence. And I'm very reluctant to see this one go through. There are other boundary treatments available. A metre is available in wall, then greenery above that. There are options. So my inclination is to support our policy and support our officers, even though the demonstrable harm and the actual use that the applicant is getting from it isn't great. So I think we'll go to the vote now. So again, just for the sake of clarity, the recommendation is for refusal. So if you're voting positively, this would be for refusal at this moment in time. So I'll start with myself. Councillor Smith, 4. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Against.
Councillor Cannell.
For the refusal, Chair.
Councillor FD.
Against the refusal, Chair.
Councillor Eves.
Abstain.
Councillor Gooding.
For the refusal, Chair.
Councillor Mr. Shaw.
Against.
Councillor Stanley.
For.
Councillor Weston.
Against the refusal.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Wilson.
Against.
Councillor Wotton.
For.
Could I just ask Sonia to confirm that is 6 for the refusal, 5 against the refusal?
That's correct.
That item is refused. Thank you. We're now moving on to referred items. So the first one, item 10.1, is 23 Harrogate Road, Hockley, demolish an existing residential dwelling and construct a 4-bed dwelling house. Katie Rogers is going to present on this one first, please.
Thank you, Chair. So members will see on the screen the location plan. The application site is edged red with a frontage onto Harrogate Road. A detached bungalow had until recently occupied the plot with a frontage approximately in line with the neighbouring properties to the north and the south. Just going to zoom in to a section of this plan. Sorry. So members will be able to see on the screen on the right hand side the proposed site plan. The proposal seeks to construct a detached two-storey house in place of the bungalow. The front elevation would be approximately, again, in line with the dwellings to the north and south, shown by the cursor on the screen here. Parking and soft landscaping will be provided to the frontage. To the rear, a patio, which is this area here, shown by the cursor, would be provided, and to the rear of that, the garden laid to lawn. The rear elevation of the property would be approximately, again, in line with the neighbouring properties to the north and south. With a single-storey part of the proposed dwelling projecting slightly deeper than the two-storey rear wall. That's shown by the cursor here. There's the two-storey, and then the single-storey part projects slightly further. This site plan has annotated on it lines denoting a 45-degree angle from the rear corners of the neighbouring dwellings. So that's here with the cursor here, and here with the cursor here. This demonstrates that the council's policy that a 45-degree angle not be breached at two-storey level would be met by the proposed dwelling. I'll just zoom out of this plan. And you can see the proposed elevations to the top of the screen show a traditional building form with hipped roofs on all sides and symmetrically positioned fenestration. Windows at first floor level in the side elevation would be obscure glazed. You can see the street scene proposed to the bottom of the screen. I'll just zoom in on that slightly so it's clearer for you. So the top street scene shows as existing, and the bottom shows the proposed two-storey house. Shows the dwelling sits in it. This shows how the dwelling sits in its immediate context. The neighbours to the north and south are not two-storey houses, although one is a chalet, and the overall height of the proposed dwelling would exceed that of the neighbours. However, the roof being pitched on all sides reduces the massing of the dwelling and provides for a greater degree of spaciousness about the property and between the neighbouring dwellings. The council's policy requirement that a metre separation be achieved to both side boundaries would be met. I'll take you to a street view. So you can now see a street view. This is not looking at the application site. This is further down Harrogate Road, and this is looking at number 43 in the centre of your screen. The dwellings on either side of this are also a chalet and a bungalow, and demonstrates that the existing character of the street scene is mixed, and the proposal would not appear out of place to the detriment of visual amenity in this location. I'll take you back to the location plan. So this is number 43 here. So the image that was just on screen that shows an existing two-storey house is this property that I'm pointing at with the cursor here. And you've got a chalet and a bungalow to either side of that. Again, those dwellings are approximately in line to the front, yet they're somewhat staggered to the rear. This house projects slightly further than one, but not quite as far as another. Concerns have been raised by neighbouring occupiers, particularly with regard to concern that the proposal would cause overshadowing and loss of light. In the determination of a planning application, whether a proposal is acceptable with regard to impact on amenity of neighbouring dwellings is a material consideration. In this case, however, the dwelling would not project excessively beyond the rear wall of the neighbouring dwellings. The siting would not breach the council's 45-degree policy, and it is therefore considered that the proposal would not cause unreasonable harm by way of overshadowing to either neighbouring dwelling. In this mixed street scene, the proposal for a detached two-storey house would not be out of character. The recommendation, Chairman, is one of approval.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
We've got 2 speaker statements for this. The first one is from a Mr. O'Brien as an objector, and again, Sonny Worthington's going to read this one out for us, please.
Dear Chairman and members of the Development Committee, when my wife and I bought the property next door to 23 Harrogate Road, a little over 5.5 years ago, we were attracted by the lovely, light, airy position it enjoyed. However, all of that is now in jeopardy if this application goes through in its current form. Consequently, we would object to the application before you on 3 grounds, namely, that the total scale and mass of the proposed building represents a significant overdevelopment of the site. Secondly, that it is out of keeping with the street scene. Thirdly, that it would be detrimental to our amenity by way of the significant impact on the light received in our home caused by its sheer overall mass and overbearing. Firstly, when the previous owner of number 23 passed away approximately 16 months ago, we were not naive enough to think that someone wouldn't look to buy the property and seek to extend it. However, this proposal is a significantly larger development than we ever imagined. It is almost 3 times the size of the previous building, and the side wall that would face us would be about 2.75 times the size of the previous one, and it would be around 2.6 metres closer, that is 8.5 feet. Its sheer size will dwarf most of the properties in Harrogate Road as well as Leamington Road behind it. Certainly, the residents of 32 Leamington Road did object to the proposal on the grounds of adverse effect on their residential amenity by reason of overlooking and loss of privacy, a consideration under Council Policy DM19. The objection has not been included in the officer's report because it was received by Rochford District Council after the due date for submissions. I understand this is because the residents concerned did not receive a consultation letter. However, it does serve to illustrate their concern at the likely impact the sheer size and mass this development will have on them and other neighbours in Leamington Road. Further, contrary to paragraph 13 of the Planning Officer's report, the scale, bulk and height of the proposed building is not comparable to other properties in the vicinity. That is, unless the definition of vicinity being used includes roads within a quarter-mile radius. Policy DM26 of the Council's Management Plan states that developments must be of suitable density for the locality. This application before you appears to be of greater density than any other existing property in Harrogate Road. Secondly, as stated in paragraph 1 of the Planning Officer's report, the area surrounding the site is residential in character, and the street scene principally presents a mix of bungalows and chalet bungalows of similar form and appearance. The current design style of the application and its pure scale cannot be considered commensurate with the vast majority of properties in the road, and therefore would be in contravention of policy H1 of the core strategy, policies DM1 and DM3 of the Development Management Plan, SPD2 Housing Design and the NPPF. Policy H1 of the Council's core strategy states that in order to protect the character of existing settlements, the Council will resist the intensification of smaller sites within residential areas. Although limited infill will be considered acceptable, it will have to relate well to the street pattern, density and character of the locality. In addition, policy DM3 of the Development Management Plan also requires consideration of whether the number and types of dwellings are appropriate to the locality. It is our view that this development fails these tests. Thirdly, our home lies in a unique position in relation to 23 Harrogate Road, in that it has an entrance door and key habitable rooms to the side of the property that face almost exactly due south. Consequently, we receive the bulk of our primary direct sunlight for a significant number of hours each day from this side. Equally, the predominant secondary light source into other parts of our home comes from this side. As already stated, the sheer enormity of the proposed development, combined with its closeness, 8.5 feet closer, will have a significant overshadowing effect and a significant detrimental impact on the light percolating into our home. The planning officer states in paragraph 22 that any overshadowing would only occur during the day and only for a small proportion of daylight hours. Any additional loss of light from the proposal over and above that already lost from the existing building is likely to be minimal given the orientation and distance between the two buildings. We would refute this statement, not least because the overshadowing of the now demolished property lasted well into the evening at this time of year. So a development of larger scale and mass will increase the overshadowing considerably. We have asked the applicant's representatives on more than one occasion to have a proper independent daylight and sunlight survey carried out in order to ascertain the consequential impact of the development. To date, they have declined to do so. For the record, the loss of light to 21 Harrogate Road is likely to be minimal as the entrance door to this property faces north, with the consequence that its primary light source is received from the front and rear of the property. We tried to discuss the way forward with the applicant's representative, but it quickly became evident that they weren't prepared to deviate in any noteworthy way from their current position. Whilst the applicant is adhering to the Essex Parking Standards Document 2010, this same document states it is now recognised that providing a reduced number of parking spaces at a travel origin does not discourage people from owning a car. Therefore, parking standards for origin should be used as the minimum standard. This application is for a 4-bedroom property, thereby providing the potential for more than 2 or 3 car owners. Residents of Harrogate Road already suffer from high levels of commuter parking, school run parking, etc., and are being supported strongly by county, district and parish councillors in their efforts to introduce parking restrictions. The risk of additional cars being parked on the road is high from the proposal and therefore is of concern to residents, as demonstrated by those raised by the resident of 16 Harrogate Road. The comments above are the ones we have to make in a formal way. The reality is that there is an emotional side to this issue also. For us, these are the prospect of being faced by an enormous brick wall each and every time we leave our home, the oppression of being severely overshadowed all the time. We wish that you could have seen the situation firsthand, because then you could have gained a full understanding of the perspective change in our situation. However, as the old building has now been demolished, that is no longer possible. So picture, if you will, a 2-bedroom bungalow becoming a structure mass almost 3 times as big and over 2.5 times the height. The structure is closer by almost 9 feet. Try to visualize the big brick wall that would be faced every time the door is opened. Then imagine, if you would, that it is your door to your home. Finally, we do appreciate the time you have taken to listen to and consider our submission, and are sure that you will recognise how important it was for us to be able to place our objections before you tonight.
Thank you. And we have a second shorter submission for Sonia to read, again from Mr. Colin Donovan, who is the applicant. Would you like to go again, please, Sonia?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Development Committee. May I take this opportunity to pass on my best wishes to everyone in these difficult times. My name is Colin Donovan from DDW Developments, and I wanted to outline some important points regarding our application at 23 Harrogate Road. Plans were submitted on the 16th of October 2019 for a detached chalet to replace the existing detached bungalow. Our case officer advised amending the plans to a detached house as she had concerns relating to the scale and form of the proposal. The changes included reducing the depth of the proposal at first floor and altering the roof form. We therefore followed this advice and resubmitted the plans for a 4-bedroom detached dwelling on the 20th of December 2019. One of the reasons our application has been submitted for referral this evening is that our proposal would constitute overdevelopment. However, point 11 in tonight's agenda states that the proposed dwelling, by virtue of its siting, would not be harmful to the character and appearance of the street. Indeed, point 13 continues to add the scale, bulk and height of the proposed dwelling is comparable to that of other dwellings in Harrogate Road. Harrogate Road has a mixture of semi-detached bungalows and chalets in addition to detached bungalows, chalets and houses. Another reason stated is the possibility of a loss of light to an adjoining property, which we have been advised is not a material planning consideration. Our architect has advised that the overshadowing on the side windows would be very minimal within the winter months and non-existent within the summer months. In conclusion, we have changed our application in response to the officer's concerns relating to the scale and form of the proposal, and feel we have now met the criteria of Rochford District Council's planning policy. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Do any of our non-members wish to speak on this one? Councillor Mr. Hoy, please. Sorry, we're not getting volume from you right now.
I know Harrogate Road, where this building is, there is, I'm going to use Diane's microphone. Sorry, I'm now Diane. Sorry about this, the microphones are playing up. I know Harrogate Road quite well, and there is an issue around this. This is totally out of keeping with the character of the street where it is. I'm sure Councillor Mrs. Weston will bring this up as well. Around number 23, there are bungalows and chalets of nowhere near the height of this proposed property. I think there are some detached houses, but they're a lot further up. They're not opposite it, and they're not next door to it. They can't be within 10 houses of it even. And I think that the height and bulk of this is totally out of character with the part of the street scene that this will occupy. That's really the comments I was making.
Thank you. Did Councillor Mrs. Hoy also indicate she wish to say something? If you could just unmute Mrs. Hoy, please. No. Could you just confirm if you did wish to speak, Mrs. Hoy, Councillor Mrs. Hoy? Sound is gone. Did either of our other non-members wish to speak? Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Weston, you referred this one, so would you like to speak, please?
Yes, I did, Chairman. Thank you very much. I'm a bit concerned because the builder's already knocked down the bungalow, and I didn't realise they could do that until it obviously come to the development committee. Katie, I don't know whether you have you got a street view of number 25 and the bungalow where it was before it got knocked down at all?
If you bear with me, I might be able to get that up.
Do you want to carry on making your point?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I do agree, because the property that we're talking about is overdevelopment, much bigger than the house that you showed us just now. And the height of it, I know you're saying about where it is, it goes up into a point. It is again way over and above the two bungalows by the side of it, and there are bungalows right near it, and also it's more or less coming onto a bend going around Harrogate Road. So I do feel that this this detached 4-bedroom property is way over and above the scale of what it should be, and detrimental to the street scene as well. But I wanted to see whether you could find me a street scene of 25 and the bungalow that was there, just to give you an idea. And is that number 20? Is that 25 with a yellow car in? Well, that's 23 with the yellow car in. So the other one, the other bungalow is the one they've knocked down already then.
Apologies for the mic. I've unmuted myself now. Yeah, so you can see the site there.
Okay, so that bungalow, the one in the middle, where the bungalow is, the one with the red car in, that's the bungalow that's been knocked down now. So yes, the height of the height of the new house is going to be way above those two bungalows, the detached one and the other bungalow, way over and above, because you can see the size of that small bungalow, and you're now going to have an astronomical, huger detached property. I mean, I want to put this up for refusal of the overdevelopment of the property itself. I know I'm not too sure about the light side, but and that's the only thing I can think of. The size of the new property being built there. I'm not sure what else I can say on that one, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor FD.
Hello. It's a question I had sort of got answered in their first statement, which was about the where they've had a loss of light consultant go into it on their behalf, and you sort of answered the question when there's no, it's not something for us to decide about the loss of light. You've already done the 45-degree angle thing. But I was just wondering why, then that's the reason why they haven't replied to this, I suspect. So I was wondering if there was a reply and if there was going to be one, but it sort of doesn't quite matter now.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to point out to the committee that in 2017, when we had a inspector look at one of the officers' comments on the 45-degree, it was agreed that the centre of the window and not the edge of the window would be adopted, and that should have helped the officer in determining the 45-degree. However, I do think that DM1, number 5, number 9, number 10 and number 11, and if you want me to read those out, I can do, and also DM3, number 10 and DM31. And with these policies that we have made, I'd like to put a motion forward that we reject this on these policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eaves, next, please.
Thank you, Chair. just one of the things in the presentation that I'm a bit concerned about is, from what I understand in conversations I had in looking at the application beforehand, the developer did actually originally put forward a smaller development, and our planning officers advised that they could actually go bigger. And I'm a little bit concerned about that. Could we have a little bit of more meat on the bone on that one, please?
Thank you. Just before, I think that's everyone that's indicated. First of all, Councillor Weston, you referred this and indicated that you were looking to move for refusal. It's a bit difficult to just get a call out for anyone willing to second you, but obviously in the discussion so far, Councillor Stanley has also indicated that he'd look to move for refusal on this one. As you referred it first, Councillor Weston, if I come back to you, if you'd like to just reiterate before we go forward, please.
I'd like to refuse it on the aspect of being overdevelopment of that site, and if Councillor Stanley would include a couple of his points as well, included in the refusal, I would be more than happy to do that, Chairman, for refusal.
Okay, we need to be very clear on our reasons for refusal. Just because it's too big isn't sufficient detail. So I'll come to Councillor Stanley next, and if Councillor Stanley, you could indicate first of all if you're willing to second, and then offer Councillor Weston if it's appropriate reasons. Thank you, Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. I do think that we need to refuse it, not just on the bulk and what have you. So
could you just say whether you're seconding it first?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Do you want the DM?
If you could offer some Councillor Weston specifics, please.
Okay. The policy DM1, which is which has got number 5, number 9, number 10, and number 11, which indicates insufficient parking with policy DM30. Number 9 is avoid overlooking and ensuring privacy and promoting visual amenity. Number 10 is a position relationship with existing and nearby buildings in accordance with policy DM3. Number 11 is a scale and form of appropriate to locality in line with policy DM3. Thank you.
Thank you. I now need to refer back to officers, please, on the on those particular reasons. So, Katie, if you'd like to come back, please.
Thank you. I think there was a question from Councillor Eaves regarding officers discussing with the applicant potential amendments to schemes. All I can say in relation to this application is that we have the application before us, and officers do go back sometimes to applicants, agents in the course of an application. What we're seeking to make sure is that schemes comply with adopted council policy. So sometimes those changes can relate to design, sometimes size. Certainly we wouldn't be suggesting amendments that would cause a greater degree of harm or not compliance with council policy. The scheme is the one that we have before us tonight. In relation to the reasons for refusal, I think we do need some clarity. I have concern particularly about any reason for refusal relating to insufficient parking. If I just share on the screen. And again, I'm just going to zoom in to the site plan. So the property will benefit from an integral garage. Sorry, So to the right hand side of your screen here, you should see the site layout plan. So there's 2 parking bays here that meet the council's required standard, in addition to an integral garage. I would be very concerned about any recommendation for a reason for refusal involving insufficient parking. Again,
can I just, for clarity, Councillor Weston, are you happy to remove that reason for insufficient parking based on the officer recommendation? If you could unmute, please.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I don't think so, to be honest with you, because for a 4-bedroom house that size is going to need more than two parking spaces. That would concern me with having more cars parking on the road on Harrogate Road.
Can I just stop you there and just say we've just heard really clearly from officers that we have compliance with standard. So whether the house is 4-bedroom or
okay,
not,
all right,
we have compliance.
Right. Okay, if I've got to comply with it, I have to comply with it. Okay, go on.
Well, you don't have to, but
no, well,
it's the advice.
Okay. Yeah, go on. Yes.
Okay. If you'd like to continue then.
Yeah. Also, sorry, I've just zoomed into this section of the floor plan that shows the integral garage that's proposed, in addition to the 2 parking bays in front of it on the driveway. I'm just going to zoom out of this plan slightly. So I think I've also heard in the discussion about a reason for refusal relating to ensuring privacy to neighbouring properties. So this, where my cursor is now, we're looking at the first floor plan. So there are windows proposed in the side elevation at first floor. They'd serve bathrooms and en suites, and there's a condition imposed that would require those windows to be obscure glazed and fixed shut. So I can't really think we can support a reason for refusal that suggests that this is going to cause an undue loss of privacy to neighbouring properties as a result of overlooking. If I just then again point out on this, so my cursor is on the right hand side of the screen now. So those windows would be in the first floor level here, and then to the southern boundary here. And windows at first floor level in a rear elevation are just not an unusual thing in a residential area such as this. And we wouldn't really be concerned with any overlooking from the ground floor windows. So I am concerned about how we can support a reason for refusal around ensuring privacy to neighbouring dwellings.
Take a hold there. I'm noting that you're indicating, Councillor Stanley, but I'm just, and I will come back to you. So I just need to go to Councillor Weston, who's proposing the refusal. Councillor Weston, can you comment on whether you accept the officer remark regarding the privacy, the side obscured and so on? If you could unmute, please.
Sorry, yes, I'll have to accept that, and I have to accept what she's saying. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would you like to carry on, please, Katie?
Chairman, can I come in for a moment?
I'd like the officer to finish their comment, and then we'll go to the motion that we're specifically talking to.
Well, I'd like to come in and ask a couple of questions there.
Yeah, but the officer's going to finish their comments first, please.
Okay.
So I think if we need to sort of, or I'd recommend that we flesh out a reason for refusal. It can't just simply state about overdevelopment. I think we need to explore the harm that this proposal would cause. So I think there's also been reference to parts of DM1 policy that talk about relationship with nearby buildings, the scale and form appropriate to the locality, but I just haven't heard that discussed in relation to the reason for refusal sort of as a whole, and the issue of overdevelopment. All I would say on that point is that yes, the proposed dwelling would be significantly larger than the existing dwelling on the site. But was there? It's been demolished now. That bungalow was particularly modest in the street scene, so perhaps the difference is more stark. But I think what we have to consider is not what the difference would be, but we need to focus on this street scene at the bottom of the screen here. So rather than compare the two, if you like, it's about how this would appear in the street scene if it were built. And there is a degree of spaciousness between the properties. It is of a width, but it does achieve a 1 metre separation to each side. And the hipped roof, albeit higher, yes, the eaves level where the 2 stories apart would be in line with the dormer to the side of the chalet. And the hipped roof does create a greater degree of spaciousness. These properties would be in line, so they wouldn't be, this dwelling would not be sited further forward, more prominent than these two in terms of the front elevation. Thank you.
Councillor Weston, if you could confirm that whether you want to stick with your comment, which I think I interpreted that the overall scale, bulk and mass of the building would be detrimental to the visual amenity of the street scene. Is that one you want?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. I still believe that it is. It's the proposed dwelling is overbearing, and it's not in keeping with the street scene, and especially next to the 2 other properties as well, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Weston has clarified the reasons, and we will just restate those before we go. Councillor Stanley, as the seconder, you indicated you wanted to offer some further comments.
Thank you, Chairman. There was no mention about the 45-degree, which was agreed with the inspector as centre of the window and not the edge of the window as portrayed. But nevertheless, the council do not like tandem parking, and that is a car in front of a garage as well as using the garage as another parking area, because that is tandem parking. So that is one other thing. And the fact is that when it says ensuring privacy and promoting visual amenity, well, it's not a very visual amenity with a rather large blank wall of bricks, which we, if I remember rightly, in Rayleigh itself, we asked the occupants of that particular building to make it more amenable of the property facing the brick wall that was facing the property in that garden when it was built, and we had them do something about it in the way of making it more of a visual visual amenity rather than a one big lump of bricks, in other words. So what I'm not totally satisfied with this ensuring privacy from the people in the house. It's more from people outside of the house that are looking to the house. And I think that that is something which has already been mentioned, but I do support Councillor Weston's overbearing and not in visual correspondence with the surrounding area. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Katie if you would just go over your understanding of the reasons for refusal, just to make sure that everyone's clear, please?
Yes. Did you want me to respond to anything that we've just heard, or are you happy for me to just go with the?
If you go through those reasons, please.
Okay.
A full discussion, and everyone's got a good understanding of where we're going with this one.
Okay. So the reason for refusal I've heard is that there's concern that the overall scale, bulk and mass of the proposed dwelling will be detrimental to visual amenity in the street scene, out of character. Then they also heard overbearing. I just would like to clarify whether the concern is solely in relation to the visual amenity in the street scene and the impact on the character of the locality, rather than including any concern about particular harmful impact on residential amenity to either neighbouring property.
Councillor Weston, if you could just confirm, are you concerned about the visual amenity to the neighbours or the visual amenity to the street scene?
I would have thought both, to be honest with you, Chairman, but obviously.
Okay.
Yeah.
That. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm happy with the visual amenity. I'm just that's clear. Like, you're concerned that this dwelling would be inappropriate because of its mass, its height, its scale, everything taken in the round in this particular plot in this street scene. So the reason for refusal is all about that, and we'll relate that back to the relevant part of policy DM1. And I think what I'm understanding is that you accept that the proposal wouldn't specifically cause any harm by way of overshadowing, being overbearing on the residential amenity of either neighbouring property. It's more about how it looks in the street scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Councillor Williams, you just did a quick indication before we go to the vote on this one, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure if this is relevant. I've just been looking on Google Maps, looking at this street. I really don't think this would interfere with the street scene. It's quite a mixed bag. I wouldn't have any problems with authorising this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cannell.
Chair, thank you. Just to indicate, I won't be voting on this matter due to technical difficulties during the officer's original report. I'll be abstaining from the vote here.
Thank you. Councillor Eaves.
Just a very quick point, Chair. Thank you. One of the things that is difficult about this particular application to consider is the fact that you're going from one extreme to the other. There's no doubt that the previous building there was a significant underdevelopment of the site. Yeah, okay, the builder is pushing it to the extreme, but I tend to agree with Councillor Williams where in the street scene, I went down there earlier on, and the street scene is so mixed down there. I'm a little bit unsure as to whether on appeal we'd actually win the argument that's being put forward at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gooding, you indicated.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Just can you clarify with the parking there? I heard Councillor Stanley mention that it was tandem parking, but from the visuals that I saw, it looked to me that it was side-by-side parking.
Just now we're moving for a reason for refusal, and the parking hasn't been mentioned as a reason. If this motion for refusal isn't successful, then we'll come back to that. Right, members, we have a motion for refusal put forward by Councillor Weston and Councillor Stanley. The officer has just been going over the reasons, so we'll go through the members. So if you're ready on your buttons, Councillor Mrs. Shaw, for or against the refusal?
Against.
Councillor Cannell, you've said you'd opt out on this one. Councillor FD, for or against the refusal?
Against the refusal.
Councillor Eaves, for or against?
Against.
Councillor Gooding.
Abstaining.
Councillor Mr. Shaw.
Against.
Councillor Stanley.
For.
Councillor Weston.
For.
Councillor Williams.
Against.
Councillor Wilson.
For.
Councillor Wootton.
Against.
And myself, I'm against the refusal. So if I can just check with Sonia, I've got that 3 for the refusal and 7 against the refusal.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So members, that item for refusal has been defeated. So I now move the approval, which is printed on 10.1.11. There's 9 points there. Could I just ask, before we go any further on that, if Katie could just answer the question that Councillor Gooding put with regard to the parking, please?
Thank you. Just share my screen again. Just going to scroll up to the layout plan. Sorry, across. So members can see clearly, I've zoomed in a bit more to the layout plan that's proposed to the right hand side of your screen. There are 2 parking spaces either side of each other on the driveway, accessed by a drop curb that will be onto Harrogate Road. So, you know, easy access to both of those off Harrogate Road, independent of each other. And then in addition, there's a parking space provided in the integral garage. There's a condition recommended that makes sure that these 2 parking spaces to the site frontage will be retained in perpetuity, available for the parking of vehicles. Generally speaking, we accept in council policy that a single dwelling house, to meet the council's parking standard, would require the 2 bays. On bigger sites, we require visitor parking at 0.25 spaces per dwelling. But it's not general practice to require the visitor space on a single dwelling house plot. But in any case, this site would provide those 3 spaces, but the 2 are crucial and they can be accessed independent of each other.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. Due to the fact that the officer hasn't mentioned on the 2017 for refusal of the centre of the window being 45 degrees, as the inspector has already indicated, I'd like to put the motion forward that there is tandem parking, and also the 45 degree is not acceptable in our legislation.
We're going to be voting on the motion for approval as printed next. So I think everyone, we've had a good and long discussion on this one. So I think I'm content that we move to a vote on this. So as mentioned, the approval is mentioned on 10.1.11. There's 9 points there. So those in favour of the approval, if we go through, myself, Councillor Smith, 4. Councillor Mrs Shaw,
4.
Councillor Cannell excluded himself. Councillor FD,
4.
Councillor Eves,
4.
Councillor Gooding,
Abstain.
Councillor Mr Shaw,
4.
Councillor Stanley,
Against.
Councillor Weston,
Against.
Councillor Williams,
4.
Councillor Wilson,
Against.
Councillor Wotton.
4.
Thank you. Can I just confirm?
Chairman, can I ask a question? Chairman, can I ask a question?
Not for a moment.
Okay.
Can I confirm with Sonia, please? We've got 7-3.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
That item is approved. Councillor Weston, just very quickly then, please.
Yeah, on the approved side, it says on number 3, no development shall take place until samples of materials to be used in the construction. So have they already given the samples because they've knocked everything down now? That's the only question I want to ask, really.
Councillor Weston, we've made the proper decision. If there's further detail, if you wouldn't mind discussing that with officers after the meeting. Now, members, we're at 9:47. Not quite sure how long this next item is going to take. I know Councillor, Mr. and Mrs. Hoy have been, I think, particularly waiting for this one. Can I, on a show of hands, have your permission to continue the meeting till a maximum of 10:30 to get this out the way? Right.
Chair, just be excused for 2 minutes because I need to take some painkillers.
Okay, thank you. We will continue the meeting, but we
I
will
can
have a
hear
very
you.
brief 2-minute adjournment. Okay, I think we're all ready to go. So item 10.2. This is 66 Lower Road, Holmbridge. This is a referred item. This, just as a reminder, this is the item that the addendum refers to, which was circulated. So once more, Katie Rogers is going to present this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So members should see on the screen the location plan. The application site is edged red, although members will note on the addendum that the site should be edged only up to this central point here. So the application only extends up to the point at which my cursor is showing. So that's approximately half of that what's shown edged red on the plan on screen. The site borders Lower Road to the north and Kingsway to the east, which is a private road, shown by the cursor along here. The site is currently occupied by a single-storey dwelling, shown on these plans here. So my cursor is showing you the floor plan of the dwelling at the moment, and then the elevations show that it's modest in scale. So now on screen, you will see the site plan. The proposal is for a 2-storey building containing 7 flats. The site plan here is orientated with Lower Road to the bottom of the screen, just here on the cursor. A parking area will be provided forward of the building in this area here shown by the cursor, with an exit-only access onto Lower Road to the south, centrally positioned. The other access would be provided to the frontage parking off Kingsway in this position here. In addition to the parking to the front, there would be space for some soft landscaping, and a tree positioned here is shown. A second parking area is proposed to the rear of the site with further access off Kingsway. A cycle and bin store would also be positioned to the rear of the site here. The communal amenity space would be to the rear with a small in the rear shown by the cursor in this location here. And then small patios would also be provided to the ground floor flats to the side and to the front. So on screen are the proposed elevations and floor plans. The proposed elevations, if I just point out on the floor plan, show a balcony proposed in this location here to one of the flats, one here and one to the front. These would be enclosed, So they're not external to the wall of the rear wall of the building, but within. So you wouldn't get significant views out onto the neighbouring amenity spaces, particularly the amenity space that's closest to the neighbouring property as rear wall. The form and appearance of the building, if you look just to the bottom of the screen, would be traditional, with pitched roofs and gable ends. Fenestration would have a degree of symmetry to it. This application follows a 2017 application which was refused and dismissed on appeal. The proposal has been significantly amended, and importantly, the two-storey part reduced in depth adjacent to the boundary with the neighbouring property to the west. This is in this position here. So this is adjacent to the ground floor plan. The first floor plan is also staggered such that the rear wall here, adjacent to this rear wall boundary of the neighbouring property shown with the cursor here, they would be in line. On the previous floor plan for the refused scheme, this wall projected out at two-storey level. This change means that the proposal would no longer give rise to the degree of harm the inspector noted would have been unacceptable in relation to the earlier scheme. The height and massing of the scheme has also been reduced significantly, and it is considered that the proposed building would now not appear out of place in the locality. The building would have much more traditional form than that previously proposed. I'm just going to show this 2017 scheme, so you can see the design, the form and appearance of the building has significantly changed. The height of this to the flat roof was 9 metres, whereas the proposed building now has roofs which sort of reduce the massing. It's not one sort of flat block, and the ridge heights range from 7.9 to 8.4 metres. So they vary across. The eaves on elements of it are brought much lower though, to sort of single storey level. The recommendation is one of approval subject to the stated conditions, with the following amendments to conditions and one additional condition. So the amendment to condition 2 is simply just to list an additional plan that should be mentioned, and that's plan number 05A. The additional condition is to ensure that the right of access over the private road Kingsway is achieved, to ensure that the access off this road would be available in perpetuity, and ensure that the parking bays could all be accessed. I'll just take you back to the location plan. So we're talking about here and this point here. So this condition would read, prior to commencement of development hereby approved, confirmation that the 2 accesses off Kingsway can be provided and used for vehicles and pedestrians in connection with the development hereby approved in perpetuity shall have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The development, if approved, could not therefore be commenced unless confirmation was received that Kingsway as a private road could be used to access the parking spaces. Conditions 5 and 6 are just to be amended, just to note this, just to refer to dwellings in plural rather than single dwelling. There's flats proposed here. And condition 11 is also to retain a requirement that the access be completed prior to the first occupation, and also include that these accesses here off Kingsway be completed prior to the first occupation and both retained in perpetuity. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have one short speaker statement from Mr. Wakeling, who's the applicant, and Sonia's going to read this one out for us, please.
Thank you for this opportunity to comment prior to your decision on 66 Lower Road. I lived in Hockley since 1974 and in Lower Road, Hockley from 1980, so I've always had a soft spot for the Hockley and Holbridge areas. I remember this property on the junction of Ferry Road and Lower Road as an electrical shop, and later for many years a bicycle shop, both of which were very useful all those years ago. Latterly, the building has appeared very tired and dated. Therefore, when the opportunity of purchasing this property arose, I had the idea of building affordable flats, of which there is a shortage in this area. Should people wish to remain local, i.e. first-time buyers or downsizers, and to greatly enhance the overall appearance of a building in such a prominent position, which will fall in line with the huge development nearby. Having taken into account the advice of the Rochford Planning Department, I feel that this third application now meets the criteria for the local people and RDC with an attractive building proposal in proportion to the surrounding dwellings. I await your decision.
Thank you. This item was referred by Councillor Mrs. Hoy. If you'd like to speak first.
Thank you. What's happening there? Turn yours, mute yours. Can you hear me? Yeah, something. Yeah, I won't keep you long, Chairman. I just wanted to raise about the parking. Yet again, it's 2 spaces short of the standard 13 spaces. And unreliable area for buses. I don't know why they keep saying we have interlinks, because we don't. So I just wanted to raise those points. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other non-members wish to speak? Councillor Mr. Hoy.
Sorry, I took a while to unmute there. I just want to raise a couple of points, really. I'll probably follow on from Councillor Mrs. Hoy as well with parking in a minute. This application, I have to say, and I think most people agree, is far better than the one which was previously put in and refused. I still have doubts around the scale and the appropriateness of flats in the area when there are no flatted blocks in that road at the moment. However, I think it's something we're unlikely to win on appeal on that basis. However, I just want to come back to the parking points again. If we can pull up the plans which came out in the addendum, please, which showed the building, and particularly with reference to the 2 parking spaces or parking bays to the rear of the property. Well, I hope Katie's doing that. The parking spaces generally do agree to our parking standards. That's been said, that they measure it, and they do meet those policies. However, the 2 parking spaces to the rear of the property are what are referred to in the parking standards as parallel spaces. So the vehicles are parked end to end. Where you have end to end parking, which is called parallel parking, the spaces are supposed to be 6 meters long, not 5.5. Therefore, the space where, and that's perfect timing, the car pictured there is in a space which apparently is 5.5 meters. It should be 6 meters, because obviously the difficulty of getting out of that space. The front space I've got no problem with, because I assume that would exit straight onto Kingsway, but the car there is going to have bushes behind or another boundary treatment. It has to have a boundary treatment because that's amenity space behind, and you can't mix you can't allow the mixing of vehicles and amenity space. It just can't happen. So that space really should be 6 meters long, not 5.5. So in addition to the lack of parking spaces, because there is nowhere else to park there, I think the additional refusal should be on the grounds that the parking bay, which I think is 2, should be 6 meters long. In addition to that, on parking, I know we do have a tendency to reduce parking, but I think we need some consistency. The Anchor Public House recently put in an application which was later withdrawn, but we said it wasn't in a main urban area, and therefore it had to have more parking on it. This one we're saying isn't in a main urban area. They're a mile apart in the same village. And I'll draw the attention to policy DM30 parking standards, which says this document applies minimum parking standards for residential development, although this may be relaxed in residential areas near town centres and train stations. It's a village, not a town centre, and we're certainly not near a train station. Train station's in Rayleigh, not in Holbridge. Therefore, I think there are grounds for refusal on parking, the number of parking spaces in policy DM30, in that it shouldn't be relaxed because we are not in a main urban area, and there are no there is nowhere for vehicles to park apart from there. The W lines on Lower Road, and it's just not possible. That is it. However, if you do consider passing this, could you please add a further condition, or consider adding a further condition? We've had flatted schemes in the past in Holbridge where they are 2 stories high, and then later on they've been built into the roofs to make them 3-story. So I'd take advice from the officer on this if you wish, but I would like the permitted development rights removed so that they can't do that. I understand there is some conditions around they can't extend with porches, which I assume is probably to do with the balconies. But I'd also like the permitted development rights removed in a condition if you do pass this, so that they can't build into the roof and make it 3 stories. Thank you. That was all.
Thank you. Do either of our other 2 non-members wish to speak on this one? No. Right. Thank you. Councillor FD, you'd indicated previously you wanted to speak on this one.
Yes, Councillor, Mr. and Mrs. Hoy stole a lot of my thunder on parking now. I have to agree with them that it's very bad public transport around at the moment, and it's 1 parking space less, and as Mr. Hoy says, it's not up to the length of the parking spaces. So I find it difficult. I'd find it difficult to pass this with the parking, whereas other places we've enforced it, and we should here as well.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, please.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, again, I concur with Councillor Hoy and Councillor Efte about the parking. There literally is no further parking around there. And if we reduce our standards, I think we're storing up problems.
Thank you. Councillor Eves, I've noticed next.
Thank you, Chair. Everyone said about the parking on the 2 places on the back, but what hasn't been pointed out at the moment is the second parking space actually is unusable, because although even if you do have the 6 metres there, you still can't get past it because there isn't the car width there to be able to get past the front parking. So from the point of view of that being 2 usable parking places in the back, it simply isn't. The other thing, just to point out, the applicant in the written application he had read out, he seemed to indicate that he was keen to do the development because it would introduce affordable housing. Well, there's no affordable housing. It doesn't meet the standard for affordable housing. So I'm not quite sure where he comes from on that one. I presume that we are looking at these all being commercially sold properties. If you can confirm on that, please.
We'll gather up everything, all the questions in one go. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to, it's already been noted by other councillors, but that would be policy DM3, and it would be that would be 9 in DM3, the availability of sufficient access to the site and adequate parking provision, which there isn't. I would also, as Councillor Adrian has pointed out, that their tandem parking is in the back end of that property, and the second car couldn't overtake the first car because there isn't enough room for that car to be driven out, even to get out of its square, which is you need right angle driving ability or steering ability on that car, and I'm afraid we don't have that on any car. And with that DM3, I would also like to ask if there has been any air quality DM29 and DM31 on the provision of movements of cars in and out of that place. Has there been any assessment of air quality to that area? And also, I would like to carry that forward as a motion of refusal, please.
Thank you. Councillor Weston, please.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the on page 10 to 15 about Kingsway as a private land owned by a family trust. What would happen if they refused permission to use their land to obviously park cars and to do the building works? I'd be very concerned. Also, I'm very, very concerned with the main road for the cars and people. If this goes ahead with the cars coming out onto the Holbridge Road, that roundabout, I find it very. I feel it'd be very, very dangerous. So I'm looking to refuse this. To be honest with you.
Thank you. I'm reasonably content with this one, I must admit. There have been a number of application and variations for this site. Certainly what we started with that was refused was far too big and dominant and out of keeping as a gateway building almost to Holbridge. I think this is much more reasonable. The parking is met. There is a space for each flat. How those parking spaces is managed, I don't think constitutes anything like a reason for refusal. There are conditions clearly stated that need to be met regarding the private road access, and the development can't go ahead if that isn't sorted. And we also have to remember that this was a retail unit with multiple regular accesses to it for many, many years. So the principle, although we might not consider it desirable, of access on and around that mini roundabout is long established, and I couldn't see that holding up. So I think that I'm reasonably content with this one. Councillor Williams, I think you indicated before I go to Katie to sum up the points that have been made.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Katie, may we just see the plan again with the parking spaces, please?
Yes, bear with me.
Katie, if you'd also like to take this opportunity to sum up the various questions that have been put as well, please. I think everyone has had at least one opportunity to say something.
Before Councillor Williams asks a question, or?
Yeah, if I could just ask, from what you say, is the access to the front parking is from is it Kingsway Road?
The access to the front, so there'd be an exit only access onto Lower Road from the parking area at the front here, marked by the cursor, and the entry point to this parking area would be off Kingsway, to that boundary there, marked with the cursor.
And obviously the application couldn't go through unless they get access to the rear parking. I'm also looking at Google Maps on this one again, and it's showing a very wide Kingsway, and on your plan it has cars parked in Kingsway on the left hand side. Is that right?
The plan does, so it does show cars parked here. It's informal, so when you go to Kingsway it's sort of unmade. There's no demarcation of those parking spaces on the Kingsway street. That is all outside of the application site boundary, so we're only considering the proposal within the red line here.
But as far as you're concerned, that's not enforced parking up there on the left hand side.
It's a private road, so whether people who have rights over the road could enforce any parking, I don't know. It doesn't appear that there's any sort of formal arrangement or enforcing of parking now, but that I wouldn't say that that's key to the determination of this application.
Okay, fine, excellent. Thank you very much.
Shall I go on to address the other points? So let me go. So we have concern raised about the depth of this parking space here with this tandem arrangement. So yes, it doesn't meet the 6 meters, but you could achieve that. You would eat into this amenity space to the rear. So what we would argue is that these parking bays would be sufficiently deep to enable a car to park. Yes, it's a tandem arrangement, but it's the only tandem arrangement within the site, and tandem arrangements aren't completely, unacceptable. We have approved them tonight on the London Road site. There are some tandem arrangements of parking bays there. Again, this tandem arrangement exits onto a private drive, so it's not onto a highway in which there's significant traffic flowing along. I don't think that arrangement would be unacceptable. I have a significant concern about any reason for refusal relating to parking on this site. I think we need to bear in mind that there's been an appeal. So there's been 2 previous applications, one of which has gone to appeal. That appeal scheme was for the same number of units. Oh, sorry, it wasn't. It was for 6 2-beds and 2 1-beds. It had 13 spaces proposed, but it was 4 short. So it had a greater proportion of 2-bed properties proposed. And there was no reason for refusal in relation to the number of parking bays proposed in relation to that previous application. And that did not form part of the appeal. So I have a very significant concern about how we could reasonably justify a reason related to inadequate parking at this site in relation to this proposal. The other question that was raised with regard to air quality. This site is too small to warrant any requirement for the applicant to provide an air quality impact assessment in relation to the number of vehicle movements to and from. That hasn't been required of any applicant of a scheme that's equivalent to this in scale. We'd only look to sort of really significant strategic development sites for that, and the site is not within any air quality designated management area where there's specific concern about the level of air quality at present. I think
it was just there was a comment from Councillor Hoy about permitted development and 2-storey, 3-storey.
Apologies, yes. So flats don't benefit from permitted development, so I'm not concerned about them being able to alter the roof in any way.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask if there are any members who wish to come back at this moment? Okay, Councillor Wilson, please.
Thanks, Chairman. Notwithstanding what Katie's just explained to us, I think it's important to make sure that it's not just the number of parking spaces, but it's the number of usable parking spaces. And as Councillor Stanley said, and Councillor Eaves, the width for those 2 parking spaces at the back, there isn't actually physically room to get past the vehicle at the front.
Okay. Could I just ask Katie's opinion that if is the addition of a condition to alter the parking space non-material enough, for want of a better word, to be able to be added?
Thank you, Chairman. Just share the screen again. So I understand we're only talking about this back set, the sort of rear element of the site here in this parking arrangement. What we wouldn't want to happen really is for the change to the parking arrangement to impact on the amenity space to the rear. Having said that, I think there is possibly a way that you could achieve it would probably require moving the bin store and the cycle store so that these were positioned sort of in this area of the site here, with these 2 bays adjacent to each other, and you're widening the access point, so you've got 2 spaces either side of each other. What we'd need to just be careful of is that they can get, and the bins wouldn't move significantly. You just need to be able to have access to get the bins out for collection.
But would you consider that a big enough material change for the application to need to go back to the applicant, or do you think it is an acceptable thing to just condition?
Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
I think that you could impose a condition that required an amendment to the layout of the parking, bin store and cycle store to the rear of the site, such that the two parking bays were adjacent to each other. And I think that could reasonably be achieved at the site, with one adjacent to each other. I can't scale off this plan right immediately now. If you bear with me, I could scale just to make sure that this is of an adequate width.
I think that we will just hold on for a moment, because that could determine the success. So if you wouldn't mind just doing that, and I'll sum up where we've got to. Members, I'm going to move the approval, which is printed on 10.2.15. There are 17 points, plus there's a good number of variations, and I believe we can put a condition, put an additional condition to submit layout to deal specifically with the compliance of the parking spaces as members have requested. Can you give us an answer on the scaling yet, Katie? I'll come to Councillor Stanley, please.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify certain conditions, obviously the whole development depends upon if the owners of the Kingsway will allow the entrance, and what we are asking is for a double entrance at the rear end, not a single entrance, just a double entrance, and also whether they can use it. And I don't see how it is possible to approve the development without the actual usage of that side entrances. So
the
I don't see
development
how you can do it.
stated wouldn't be able to go ahead. And I forget which condition it was. I think it was that in the addendum that mentioned that specifically that access needed to be in place before that could happen. Katie, can you come back to us now?
Yes, so I'll just share the screen again. So the distance between the rear boundary of the site and then abutting this sort of little landscaped area to the rear of the proposed building is approximately 6.91 meters. So you could accommodate 2 parking spaces side by side that would have the council's preferred bay width. Those spaces would then be no deeper than this line here, where that existing front bay would extend to. And so you've got, I think, sufficient space then to design a bin store and cycle store around that. So what we would need to do is just put a condition together, appropriately worded by officers, just to require, so not in accordance with this plan, but in a different arrangement, to require all of those things to still be provided, but with the parking in a side-by-side arrangement.
Before we go to the vote, Councillor Eve, finally, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, would it be a sensible thing to ask to defer the decision until we have that in place? There does seem to be a good deal of concern about that particular aspect.
I'm not in favour of deferral. I believe we've got sufficient detail, a simple condition that this could be achieved. Without the condition being achieved, then the item would need to come back to us, I believe. So that said, as mentioned,
Apologies. Can I just add one thing? Just that I just want to clarify that the application wouldn't necessarily come back before members to discharge a condition, but we would be very clear in the wording of that to seek to achieve what members are looking for. So we would ask that the parking bays are provided side by side, meeting the bay size that the council has, with the bin store still provided in an adequate in terms of floor, space for the bin store and the same cycle provision. But an application to discharge a condition wouldn't generally come back before members.
Okay then. Well, we've heard that. I think with all the information, all the discussion, we've got enough to base a decision on. So there was quite a variety to the different conditions that Katie read at the start. Does anyone feel that they need Katie to go over those conditions again, bearing in? Okay, that's good. So the motion is for approval with the variations as stated. If I can go through this one then, please. Myself, for. Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
For.
Councillor Cannell.
For.
Councillor FD.
For.
Councillor Gooding.
For.
Councillor Mr. Shaw.
For.
Councillor Stanley.
Abstain.
Councillor Weston.
Abstain.
Councillor Williams.
Approve.
Councillor Wilson.
Against.
Councillor Wootton.
For.
If Sonia can just confirm that, that's 8-1.
Councillor Eaves.
Oh, beg your pardon.
Thank you, Sonia.
Oh, sorry.
Abstain.
So still 8-1 and 3 abstentions.
Yeah, 8 and 4 abstentions.
Yeah. Okay. I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. Before we go, we just really do need to thank Katie in particular, because she's presented all of these items tonight. So sterling work, and as I'm sure a lot of you can appreciate, there's a lot of work gone on prior to the meeting started, and I think we've made a good stab, and I think we've made proper decisions tonight. So I'm just going to close the meeting, but if you can remember, if you're going to stay on, wait till Sonia has confirmed that we're not live streaming before we start any personal conversations. But thank you very much. Meeting closed.